This is the Criterion Creeps podcast, and tonight we're talking about 8.5 from 1963, directed by Federico Fellini. The tagline of the film from Letterboxd: a picture that goes beyond what men think about, because no man ever thought about it in quite this way. And RJ, the synopsis for 8.5 off Letterboxd. With 8.5, Federico Fellini leaves a self-portrait where dreams and reality are a mix. With help from a most excellent cast and unique scenery, this self-reflecting film is one of his masterworks.
That's a great description of this movie.
Yeah, and you know, the IMDb one is like also quite vague. It's like, man struggles to work on his next film. It's just like,
it's not like an ambiguous plot. Like, it's pretty straightforward.
Like when you strip it down, it's a pretty straightforward idea with some flights of fancy thrown in. But it seems like people don't know how to talk plain, it seems.
People don't know how to talk plain, it seems. He says.
Yeah.
Continue.
So, this is my first rewatch in many years. I remember there was a period in my life, RJ, where I watched this movie quite a lot. And
can you explain what you mean by quite a lot? Like, you watched it once a week? You watched it like every year?
At least maybe there was a period of time where I was probably watching this every few weeks.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Why?
Not for like years, but I'm talking about there was like a several month period where I was like watching this movie. It was in the conversation with friends of mine who we were all like obsessed about watching and finding movies that were about filmmaking. And so, and this,
you could have watched Video Violence. That's a movie about filmmaking.
I didn't know it existed.
Oh,
I was too highfalutin as a child.
Yeah.
But so anyway, so it's been a while since I watched this, and like over the years, I was kind of always in my mind thinking this movie isn't anything special. Like, it's like at some point, like when you haven't watched something that you remember being, that was really good, and then you just don't watch it and you kind of don't think about it, and you're like, that movie's probably not that great anymore. So this was my first watch also, and watching this with a 16:9 television, because I remember watching this on my old CRT screen, and there's like the one scene where like the one film critic is in the room waiting for Guido to finish up with his treatment, and there's like those like black and white striped lines behind him. On that old CRT monitor, it would be like all weird, like mosaic kind of pattern going on, and I was like, what the fuck's wrong with the disc? There's something wrong with that. That should just be black and white. But it was like some weird, just like weird hertz per second refresh rate gimmick thing.
And that was a problem with the Laserdisc?
It was a problem with the monitor itself. And I remember being like, whenever I see that like in movies for years and years, I was always like a weird thing. I'm like, what the hell's up with that? And now it's been solved with the magic of Blu-ray. So I have an anecdote about this film that I'll share before talking about this movie that I still think is like pretty amazing. So this, I think, was my first blind buy Criterion purchase. From Future Shop, the now dead brand, Best Buy of its time, that Best Buy wound up buying, and then they just closed them all up. This was $41.99, which was quite a lot of money back in 2001. And I remember buying this. And I was like, oh man, what if this movie sucks? Like, what if this it has this really cool cover, it looks really graphically pleasing, but I'm like, what if this I have no idea if this is going to be good or not. So I went on to, at the time, the Warren Ellis forum. Yeah, and this, because it's like back, it's hard to explain. Like, it was like kind of a big deal. It was like the Reddit of its time. Like for a comic group, like this guy would like be posting himself every day, and people would just be on there, like-minded individuals who were fans of Warren Ellis's comics. If people don't know who Warren Ellis is, and people would just like write whatever the hell they wanted. They'd throw up polls and questions and stuff like that. And I remember like asking like, "Hey, I just bought this movie. Should I like open it or should I return it? Because like I don't know if this is actually like worth $42, which I mean, for a lot of people, when they look at that, they were probably thinking like 42 pounds or 42 US dollars. And so, but I remember it being fairly divisive. Like there were some people saying you should definitely watch it, and there were other people saying no, fuck that, Fellini sucks. But I also remember Warren Ellis saying return it. It's like self-indulgent crap or something like that. I don't want to put words in his mouth from like 16, 17 years ago, but I'll always remember that. And I wound up keeping it and opening it and watching it and thinking like this movie's awesome. Like this movie's like it's not like other movies like at all. Like especially at that point in my life watching this movie, I hadn't seen anything quite like it. I was just starting to get into like this like Criterion filmography of these sort of films. It was definitely the first Fellini movie I ever watched. It's quite possibly one of the first Italian movies I'd ever seen. And I was like, whoa, is this like what I'm missing out on with these Italian movies? Like, unless you count like maybe like the spaghetti westerns, like the Sergio Leone movies, like this probably was like the first like non-Western, I guess, of Italian movies I watched. And so this movie opened my eyes to like the possibilities. Like I was starting to get there. Like I was watching David Lynch stuff at the time. And like this Fellini guy, his name would pop up every once in a while. It's a really cool kind of magical sounding name, Fellini. But it's like, what does it mean? What is this Fellini-esque? And it wasn't always a good trajectory because I remember trying to watch Fellini Satyricon, I think is like a follow-up to this, and being like, no thanks. Like I did whatever that movie was, and we will get to watch it one day, and maybe it'll be a different experience.
Is it part of the collection?
It is, I believe, now.
Or is it part of the Eclipse series?
No, it would be. It's a legit movie with Roma as well. It have its own release, I'm pretty sure at this point. So one day we'll get to watch those too and see if that experience will improve or not. But anyway, this movie. It's probably, I would say, over-regarded. Like, there's a period of time where, like, film critics everywhere would have this, like, in their top 10 movies of all time. Like, film critics, film directors. I know, like, Terry Gilliam, I think, says this is, like, one of his, like, all-time favorite movies. And there's actually a lot of weird little bits of, like, Brazil that are, like, taken from this movie specifically. In fact, Terry Gilliam does the commentary track on this movie. Or he has like an introduction to it too, and he just touches upon like sort of like the metaphors in the film and what he thinks they mean and stuff like that. And I always thought
like
that was,
what?
I don't know, like the end of the movie.
Okay.
Like with the little kid and being like little Guido with his little flute and just like the march of humanity and creativity having to like march on into the unknown and stuff like that. And the spirit will never die. That sort of look. And it's like quite it's some real disturbing footage of Terry Gilliam sitting like on this couch, this grubby couch in his like sweater and slacks with like, I believe he might not be wearing shoes, but I think he might be wearing socks. So he's not a total savage. But like I remember being like, oh man, Terry Gilliam, they just showed up at his house and they're like, hey, you want to talk about it and a half? And he went, absolutely. And they're like, you want to change? No, I'm good. let's do this right now.
He was in his own house. I feel like he can do whatever he wants. Yeah. And any YouTube listeners that aren't aware of what's going on can listen to last week's full episode
of the Ghoul School.
I still think I'm right.
Yeah, okay.
I still think I'm right about the socks and the shoes thing. But that's funny. That reminds me of that Dan Aykroyd, that conspiracy theorist movie I watched where it's interviewing him and it's in a room with like no lights on and it's just him smoking cigarettes for like 2 hours, just saying nonsense. It's like what they do with Terry Gilliam, but he like had something meaningful to say, it sounds like.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, it's like there's the people who are like, this is their jam, this is their movie.
So what? Are you glad you didn't listen to Warren Ellis?
Yeah.
And watch it? It's weird that he would call it self-indulgent. The writer of Transmetropolitan is like begging on stuff, you know?
Yeah, I know. Well, I remember him. I can't remember if he exactly said that in so many words, but there was something to that effect that it's like, you don't need this in your life. And I'm like, oh, that makes a lot of sense though. There is not a lot of Fellini spirit in the writing of Warren Ellis at all.
Not yet.
Not yet. He hasn't got to that point writing Castlevania for Netflix.
Oh yeah, and it's fucking directed by that nut bar, that Ari Shadkar or whatever. Have you ever seen interviews with that guy?
I have no idea. You know what I have seen though?
Fucking nuts. What, 8.5?
I have seen 8.5. Hey, so I don't know. That's me putting the cards on the table. I could like run through this whole movie beat by beat because like that synopsis stinks, and maybe it'll kick loose some ideas and thoughts about this movie. And like so many like amazing moments are in this movie. But RJ, what do you think of this 8.5? I know that you and Fellini have had some problems in the past.
Is this the part where I come in and I shit all over 8.5, and then hordes of hate mail come in to the podcast?
Well, see, I know for a fact that you do like this movie, but I do know that there is the legendary La Dolce Vita that one watches, and that will be interesting as a rewatch too, because I think that movie's also a snooze fest. But,
Yeah, La Dolce Vita, and we'll get to it. That was the beginning of the end of Fellini with me, and the beginning of a long abusive relationship between me and him. But I actually did start with 8.5. Again, this is another one I own. We're on a hot streak right now with all these major players in the Criterion scene, all these big titles. So this is one I actually have seen before, and yeah, you're right. I do like 8.5, even with having seen La Dolce Vita. I do like 8.5. That movie I think sucks still, but whatever. So 8.5 is pretty cool. I watched it I don't know, before we started doing the pod, so that's got to be at least over 2 years ago. I watched it with roommate Scott. Fun fact: his parents, their cat is named Fellini. I bet you didn't know that.
I did not know that. There's no possible way I could ever know that.
Well, we talk about cats a lot.
We do, but you
in real life,
you've been saving that one in your back pocket, I think.
I was waiting for the 8.5 episode, Jarrett. Okay. I was waiting. So yeah, this was the first Fellini I ever watched, and I was a big fan of it the first time I watched it. So on rewatch, I still think it is a very good movie. I still like it quite a bit, and for a lot of reasons that we'll get into. But I didn't. I don't know. I don't know what it was. I wasn't as wowed by it this second time watching it, but I do think that there were things I picked up that I maybe didn't notice the first time, especially now having seen what is this, our sixth Fellini film? Maybe not that many, at least 4.
That's a good question. Well, it all began with Amarcord.
Amarcord, Variety Lights, Knights of Cabiria. The Ship Sails On.
Yeah.
We watched his horror movie separate.
Yeah, that was for fun.
I feel like there was one more. So this is like the 5th or 6th at least. But you can figure that out. Anyways, so yeah, I've seen a lot more Fellini now. I think I'm more on with him, jive with what he's like. But yeah, I do think this is his, of what I've seen at least, I think this is his best. What do you think between this and Knights of Cabiria? I know you really like that one. Apples and oranges or what?
Yeah, I mean they do different things for me. Because there's that. This is he has a jump in his types of movies he was making. Because there's kind of his before 8.5 and before La Dolce Vita. It was kind of his. He was still a neo-Italian realist, I guess is what they call it, where he was making these movies that were about regular day life in Italy, and but he was kind of introducing these more I guess the things that we would associate with the Fellini-esque sort of elements, where it's the craziness of life, the rhythms and stuff like that, the faces and all those his emphasis on character and stuff like that. Became more and more he wanted to be a cartoonist, and he basically started animating his films with real life people, and Knights of Cabiria is right on that borderline, but I think it's right before he starts getting into, I guess what you'd call his self-indulgent period, which is 8.5 would fall into that, but I think this is also probably at his peak abilities of dancing with or doing those things. And then you have things you were kind of mentioning, it's not Criterion, but Spirits of the Dead, he does his the short story in there, Toby Dammit, which with Terrence Stamp, and there's a lot of 8.5 in that, but it's deployed in a horror story and in amazing color,
yeah,
and it's very different, it's brief, and I don't know. They're again totally different creatures. It's kind of hard to compare these movies his successes.
Yeah, I got you.
There's definitely
you don't have to.
Yeah,
right?
There's definitely I mean, I'd say that there's kind of a back and forth for me between 8.5 and Amarcord. I think there's so much, because obviously 8.5 kind of goes back into kind of Fellini / Guido's past, that autobiographical stuff. And Amarcord is his autobiographical film with those exaggerations of tall tales and stuff like that. And 8.5 is kind of like the cool cold version of Amarcord. So I mean, like again, like they're all like just different movies, even though like they're all his movies. Yeah, they're all him, but they always feel like a little bit different from one another, which is actually really interesting. And I hadn't thought about it till you asked me to compare his movies.
Yeah, I did that intentionally.
Yeah.
I knew I could evoke that response in you, and I'm really good at this podcasting thing.
Amazing.
Yeah, I know. I'm glad that you admit it. But yeah, I think 8.5 is super cool for a lot of reasons. But just to start off, the way you were talking about like where his films fit like within his own work and stuff, I think this is definitely it's like the biggest production, like clearly, I think, but it's also it's the smoothest. Like this thing is so fucking smooth.
Those camera movements,
the camera, the choreography, like this is like next level directing stuff. I think the best like demonstration of that is in the opening scene of him at the spa. Ooh. Where like everyone's kind of walking around and he's just walking around with his glasses smoking. What happened?
Oh no, what I want to do is let's go through this movie. I got notes. I had
lots to say.
I know, but you interject and I'll kind of go through it and we'll just kind of intermingle.
Before you talk about the opening, can I just say that the opening gives me wicked anxiety, and it just really it makes me wish he did more horror stuff.
I know,
because I think he would have been really fucking good at it.
So okay, that's like a side note, but like it's always like these directors, like the big name directors who like are not horror directors. They do horror better than like these fucking losers who are like committed to making horror cinema, who are just they're just bad directors. Hi Ty West.
That was like one of my zingers almost.
Yeah, I know, but no, Mick Garris. He did have Fuzz Bucket, I guess. But anyway, so yeah, no, like Fellini, like Kubrick is like the other like big name where it's like, oh yeah, he goes and makes Shining, and it's like, yep, that's what people should be trying to do. And these are guys who just like never did horror ever again. They're like one and done. So anyway, the car traffic dream sequence. I kind of forgot that that's how this movie opens, and as soon as it started, I went, oh yeah. And it's like so amazing. It's actually funny like watching this back to back with Wild Strawberries because there's a lot of overlap, and in particular, there's a weird overlap because I'll talk about it later. But Woody Allen's Stardust Memories, it is very much his 8.5, like full on, like him doing like the exact same opening except it's on a train. And black and white, and about a director who's struggling with his impulses and stuff like that, and a whole menagerie of women and stuff like that. But there's also like the Wild Strawberries thing because he's going to get an award, and there's these flights of fancies and stuff like that. So like these movies like Wild Strawberries 8.5, there's a little bit of crossover. But I think this 8.5 totally outdoes Wild Strawberries. But yeah, this car traffic dream sequence. This is like the sound design is reminiscent of what David Lynch goes on to do with Eraserhead and stuff like that. There's this whole buildup of silence and then the slow introduction of like audio cues. The use of like kind of these like silent passing overs of these faces and cars and these freeze frames that are just like totally against what film is always going for, which is this like illusion of reality, because it just breaks and you realize, hey, I'm looking at a still image. That's not real. And because that's not how dreams work even, but this is like kind of this dream sequence, and it's like there's the one American photographer, Robert Frank, who has this like these really great, there's this one iconic photo of him called like America, and it's like these figures standing in windows with the American flag off the building, but there's these people's bodies, you can't see their faces because they're in complete darkness, and they're like looking out the window, and they're just like, I don't know, it's this great image of like alienation, and this film's got that too. And it's like the figures all on the bus, you can't see their heads, and it's just they're just drab and weird, and you're like, what's going on? Because everyone's motivation in this scene is unknown. They're like, people are just there and you don't know why, and they're staring at Guido, the dreamer in this. You never see his face, you only see the back of his head or like part of him at any given point, because there's this big build toward like the reveal of who this character is. And yeah, it's like I said, it's super tense. I'd like love to see, like someone could make an entire film about it, and it wouldn't be as good. But yeah, there's elements here that like, man, people should be like borrowing from this more than like just looking at like whatever the most successful horror movie is or whatever, and just stealing from other ones. Like, look at other movies and look what they're doing, and maybe steal from that instead.
Yeah, the part that I really like when he's like looking around and people in other cars are looking at him, and then he looks at the bus and it's just like uniform people, or not like in uniforms, but the people are in uniform and they're all looking out the window at him, and it's just like this long row of people all kind of staring at him. I find it super unsettling. But yeah, that intro is awesome. It's a lot of anxiety, and it's like I was saying, that's better horror than a lot of anything that they make now. Like what you're saying, they should have put that in that new Halloween movie by the director we'll talk about in a couple weeks.
Yeah, and then you have the smoke buildup in the car, the escape. You get the fly away moment. That's like really still quite amazing. You get the iconic Guido costume, that hat, the coat.
The glasses.
The glasses. Yeah. Oh man. I'm still wearing my my Guido glasses to this day because of this movie. And then you get the escape. He starts flying, real fake ass flying. It's no Richard Donner Superman, that's for sure. But then he gets caught, and he has this big rope around his foot. He gets dragged back to Earth, and he falls back into the ocean with a fake ass dummy. It's very Italian. And then he snaps back to the waking world. His hand reaches out from his bed, and we find out that, there's always a reading to me that he's essentially in detox at this, like...
That's what I thought.
Yeah, he's at this, like, holy spa. And, he's, like, being looked after. Again, we haven't seen his face yet. He's getting the treatment for being worn down, probably, like... raging alcoholism and partying and stuff like that, because as you see in this movie, every single night there's a party and revelry, and that you're supposed to be making movies, but like, when are you supposed to ever rest to like be good enough to make a movie the next day when you're just like constantly at shindigs and pressers and all this stuff like that? We get this, like, the first, like, kind of like big iconic shot for this movie for me is the worn down, beaten down face of Marcello Mastroianni as Guido here. His big bags under his eyes, and he's like getting ready for another day of bullshit. There's like one of my favorite ongoing things in this movie, and it's like, he just pushes this movie for me to like that higher level of like filmmaking, and it's like stuff that like when I'm watching it makes me smile because I'm like, oh fuck, I love this movie. Is like his like body language in reaction to stuff, because there's the bit where like someone's like buzzing in, and he's like kind of standing there in his like pajamas, and he's like starts like lowering on his knees, like he starts dropping his body into this droop, and like I just love that. It's just like this weird little character beat, and he has these like little moments throughout where like he's like he's kind of like building up scenes in his mind, or he's like living his life like he's in a movie, and he is in a movie coincidentally, but like in his mind he's like that. He makes these little beats and stuff like that, like when he's swinging the purse later on, when he's having dinner with his mistress Carla and stuff like that, or like walking down the hallway, he's singing these little songs, like, and they're like, you think it's like the morning, but it's like, oh no, it's the afternoon. He just slept away the like half of the day, being just a Guido.
Being a what?
Being a Guido, being himself.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
And then we get the scene that you were just mentioning, the flight of the Valkyries, which is where you get the big spa, crazy camera panning everywhere, flowing through people, and all the faces turning and smiling at the camera, and it's like, this is like totally peak Fellini action. You get people of all shapes and sizes, all varieties, craggy, made up, ridiculous makeup, hordes of nuns, all just like, there's this constant flow. It's like almost like a musical number of reality, which again is like the that Fellini quality of just like everything is sort of like everyone's kind of marching to this invisible music, but because we're the audience, we get to actually enjoy that set to music. So yeah, like I said, you get all that stuff, and it's so elegant, it's so well made. The camera's always moving, and like there's scene after scene where it's like always just like following the action, and it's like the exact right call. It's like when I've shit upon a Guillermo del Toro when I'm watching his movies, and I go like, this guy just doesn't know what he's doing a lot of the time. Like he's making these things like it's just the wrong decision to me. And then I never feel that way watching this movie or any of Fellini's movies. Usually it's like I'm always like he knows exactly what he's doing all the time, and it's always interesting. But yeah, so then we get introduced to Guido's buddy Mario, played by Mario Paiso here as Mario Mezzobotta, and his girlfriend, played here by Barbara Steele, the original anime girl and star of a couple of Mario Bava movies. Yeah.
What about Mario Bava?
He likes Barbara Steele too. Those Italians really like Barbara Steele. She had those crazy eyes.
I wonder if it was the eyes, or it was the curves, or it was all those womanly things. But yeah, I think that fountain scene is awesome. It's really good. Yeah. So like I said, it's so smooth. It's so smooth. I imagine that he was doing like you said, all the people are like moving to the music, even though it's not there. I imagine that's just kind of how he saw life. He would just watch people walking by, and he would hear like "Fly to the Valkyries" playing in his head. Mm-hmm. So like a guy plunging the toilet.
Yeah.
That's Fellini humor.
There you go. It is. Remember when those dudes are all jerking off in the car together in Amarcord?
I do remember when those dudes were jerking off in a car to Amarcord. Yeah. I do remember that.
Yeah, classic. So then we go on to Guido waiting for the train, waiting for Carla, his mistress, to show up. This very like full-bodied blonde bombshell lady who is just kind of flitting around the edges, has these aspirations, I guess, of like hanging out with the great director, being part of the scene. And like he's asking like how her butt's doing, and she's into that.
Have you never been asked how your butt was?
No, I haven't.
Hey, Jer, how's your butt?
It's doing fine. We're here. Good. We're still here. And then we get the lunch. We get the bedding and whoring up scene of Carla.
The slutting.
Yes,
scene.
Yeah. It'll be more of a slut.
Yeah, slut it up for me, baby.
Yeah. Did that turn your crank, RJ?
It's not the word I would use, Jarrett. It's not the word or the phrase or the expression that I would use.
But it did.
That's more of a Jarrett thing. No, he just like draws eyebrows on her, but they're like straight up.
Yeah.
They're like vertical, and I'm like, what are you doing, dude? His tastes are a little eccentric. Okay, I'm gonna pretend I'm sleeping. You come in and wake me up.
Yeah.
It's like all right, okay.
You rouse me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I do like it's a really nice moment with her though, where even though she's self-appointedly kind of like a floozy, like she acknowledges it a couple times. There's a really sweet moment where he's asleep in bed and she's reading like Reader's Digest type stuff, like a little comic strip.
No, she's reading she's reading Disney comics. Like
she's reading like Disney comics, and she laughs, and then she's like, "Ooh, I better be quiet. I don't want to wake him up." And I thought that was really nice, sweet little moment.
Yeah. That's kind of like right after we get the another dream sequence, this one with his parents in this like ruin of like Italy somewhere, some field. They have ruins everywhere in the old country. And we have like just like more of like these stresses that he has and internal things with his mother and his parents and his producer who's like strolling through with some broads as producers do. And then we get the next morning where it's like, she is reading no, you're right. It is right before that dream sequence. Yep. And there's like the woman
I know.
cleaning the window and like standing in the room. Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to say, I love that. I think this is one of the best parts it's done in the movie, but it's done throughout the movie where there's like a blend between dream and reality. And like the way that they transition and stuff like that, I think it's awesome. The way they build up like I was saying, I don't think the story or the plot is ambiguous in any way, but like his memories are ambiguous, and the way that they're like interleaved with reality, I really like that. It's awesome.
No, because
sometimes you daydream, and stuff like that does happen.
Yeah, it does. So it does those flights of fancy transitions very, very well.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. Then the next afternoon we get that scene I mentioned before, him like kind of doing his little dance, his little twirl down the hall that I always love. And then we get on that elevator and he sees these priests being very priestly. not
They are
being
pretty
a
beastly.
religious person in any way. This is probably my least favorite part of the movie because I don't know anything about this Italian Catholic stuff. It's just kind of there for me.
What do you need to know, baby? I'll hit you up.
I'm not asking. Um,
Well, I think the way it's presented in this movie even is like, I think the way he does it, it's also kind of like, it's almost like a nuisance to him, right? That he always has to appeal to these people. So I thought you would have been way on board with that.
well, I mean, it is, but at the same time, it's like very like laden, and I mean that's like very Italian, right? I mean that's like the bedrock of that whole
Catholicism.
yeah, it's kind of there, right? That whole Vatican City. Am I right? Do I got my facts right there?
That is a place in the world, yeah.
Okay. So we get like our first kind of like our next big swirl of action in this movie where it's like they're on set, I guess like at a studio or the hotel lobby. It's kind of like both, it feels like. And we get introduced to more characters, more people, more hanger-oners, more like writers and people doing interviews, and there are like idiot questions and like people always wanting something or other questions for him because he's the director. We have like probably one of like the funniest scenes I think in the Criterion Collection for me is like the one guy who's like, "Hey, I got 3 old men to play the priest," and he's like, "Oh, what are you talking about?" He's like, "Yeah, I got these 3 guys. You wanted someone that's like really pathetic looking. These are like the most pathetic people I've ever seen in my life. This one's got 1 foot in the grave," and he's just talking about them, and they're just standing there and they're just taking it and completely like, "Yes, sir, I'm a piece of shit." It's like it's so funny. Yeah. Yeah, and again, like another like sequence of like just like amazing camera movements and layout and stuff like that. Just kind of like building up that tension of like being demanded upon and like not being able to actually think for yourself or like think about what you want to do because you're always like making concessions to other people. I've been there. I think we've all been there.
I haven't. I've only ever been real to myself, Jared.
Wow.
Where are we in the story? Are we at the dance party yet?
Oh, we're at the party now. That's the next.
Okay.
That is the next scene.
I love old men dancing with young women because it's
God.
like I think it's so real,
so
Jared.
sweaty
and like out of breath, and then you have these women that are like just like doing it flawlessly and like with ease or without at total ease. They're just like, you know, they're just being themselves,
comfortable in their own body.
Yeah, and then you have this fat, sweaty old man who's like, ugh.
Fuck that. No, so one of my absolute favorite moments in 8.5 is when Mario,
the ambassador.
Mario, he's like after he's dancing with Barbara Steele, and there's the one shot where she kind of like walks away and kind of like gestures toward him to come toward him, and there's this shot of him like sadly like walking toward her, and he's like snapping his fingers. I fucking that is like, yep, that is middle-aged man thinking. He's like, yeah, I've still got it.
I like that. And then there's a part where the mistress is at like a different table, and one guy comes up to Guido and is like, the ambassador is giving Signora the eye. And it's an old guy like 10 feet away from her, and he's just kind of like raising his eyebrows a bunch like at her. I was like, this is all just awesome. I forgot to tell you, so I was at the Slice on Halloween weekend. I went with some friends, and there was a small contingent of dance people. There was one guy leading it. I think he had to have been on like ecstasy or cocaine or something, because he danced for about 3 hours nonstop, but he kept bringing people out. And there was an old lady he brought out, and she was like a pirate, and she was pretty old. She was like 65 plus, like maybe 70 almost.
Almost my age.
Yeah, almost your age. And she was dancing real good. Like she didn't like have to take too many breaks, but she had this old guy come out, and he was like also 65, 70. And this dude had the sickest moves any of us have ever seen. And I'll give him credit. Where like in 8.5, you have a bunch of old fat bastards. This guy at the Slice was laying down heavy moves, Jarrett, and he wasn't tiring. And it was like a lot of like really short, quick steps, like but bobbing his head while he walked. A lot of stuff like that. It was awesome. I don't know why I told you that story. What are we talking about?
Parties and old men. It was
yeah,
time.
okay. There's that stuff which I think is funny.
Yeah. So yeah, the party. We got that hypnotist who's awesome. He's so
Yeah.
like he's got like again Fellini's ability to find like the right kind of ugly people
Is
that
that
like
guy from Carnival of Souls?
yeah, there I took a screenshot of him and he definitely there's definitely some similarities to ghouls in that makeup. We get some like psychic attack as Barbara Steele's like, don't read my mind. Yeah, dance numbers and sweat. Yeah, that whole sequence is just like really great. Again, just a demonstration of like how to place the camera at the right place and just like have this whole swirl of like conversations going on, talking about communism and left and right, you know, all things that no one talks about anymore, of course.
One of my favorite lines is at the dance party, where a guy says it's an orgy of pragmatism and brutal realism.
Yeah.
Not about the dance party itself, but I think they're talking about the script. And I was like, oh shit, that's pretty hot.
No.
I was like, that's good stuff.
Then we get the Asanisa Masa sequence.
Asanisa Masa.
Yeah.
I love the opening to that, where he's doing basically the cornholio from Beavis and Butthead,
Yeah.
where he has like the back of his shirt pulled over his head and he's running around. I loved it. I was like, so that's where Mike Judge got it, huh?
Yeah, that's exactly where.
Yep.
How do you feel about all those people stomping on wine, on those grapes?
Disgusting.
I knew it.
Because you know those little kids are peeing in that.
Peeing and pooping.
Peeing, shitting. They probably
Sweating.
haven't washed their feet in like 8 years.
Yeah, that's wine, baby.
Yeah, I know that's how they used to make wine. I prefer the cold, calculated Walter White style of making wine. You just put a grape in your mouth, you leave it for like 8 years, and then you enjoy.
There you go. That was
Right?
that was gonna be my question to you. That old human foot stomped grape wine.
Yeah, I thought it was super gross.
I bet you did.
Yeah,
Yeah, and then we get that kind of like the wind down from the party at the hotel foyer. Phone call to the wife with the dare of like, you don't want me to come there. He's like, yeah, I do want you to come here. No, you don't. And I'm going to come. I'm going to definitely come. Then we get like the kind of like ongoing thing we haven't mentioned. That was also from the kind of the Flight of the Valkyrie spa scene with like the muse, his dream woman, this woman that he just keeps seeing at the spa, and he's like, yeah, that's the one. She's perfect. She'll like have all the answers to all my questions. She won't talk to me, but only when I talk to her. She'll be available. She's beautiful. She's understanding. She's this perfection. That's all I want in a woman. And so we have this kind of like, again, this sort of like sequence with him like getting closer to this woman and like trying to like create a situation where he can finally be happy, I guess. Next morning, we have the sick mistress. Poor Carla. We got that conversation with the clergy in the forest, where we get like this like kind of discussion about like the nature of film, the limitations of film, and like it's just like absurd. Like just listening to like these doddering old religious fucks going on about like what film can be and the problems that film have representing things, and like how they lose the plot.
Jarrett,
They just can't handle films. Can't handle everything.
the only people qualified to talk about film are old Roman Catholic priests.
Yeah, they're.
I don't know what you learned in your heathen school for sinners, but at a real school, we were informed of such things. So,
Right.
yeah. What were we talking about? Old men steaming?
Not yet. That's coming
okay.
though. But before that, we get Saraghina. We get the rumba.
Oh, the old hooker down by the sea.
Yeah, down on the beach.
Right near the beach.
So this like might be one of my favorite scenes in movies.
I figured it was, and it's John Watersy. It seems
It really is like because there is like an element of like divine, and there's actually there's a shot that like is so Pink Flamingos. It's like during the final sequence when Carla turns to the camera, her face and smile is like you just know that George or whatever as divine, like he like loved that, like that's like to him. And actually I was curious about John Waters and he's like if he was like a Fellini fan, and he actually there's some article I came across where he mentioned like he has this like 8.5-inch ruler that he got from seeing 8.5 in theater in like Baltimore, and he's kept it. And he said he saw this movie and it was like absolutely amazing, and he loved Fellini. I'm like, that makes so much sense. But like, yeah, this scene, like, I don't know why it has stuck with me, and why this movie like kind of captures my taste in so many ways. Like, cause it's just like it's such a strange scene. But that song, that music, like I like ever since watching the movie again the other day, I've just been like bum 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 bum. Like it just pops into my head. It's just an earworm, and I always think about that sequence because it's like this woman of like just raw femininity, this like huge like animalistic woman, like, and that's like, and it's so well cast, and like they found this woman just like, yeah, you're like this terrifying like sex woman beast that like you're not like
just like me.
Yeah, you're not like this like, you know, skinny, attractive, beautiful like woman that we've seen like all types of women in this movie, and she's like this like flip side of it, but like she's really well cast because like you totally get this idea that like this woman knows how to rumble, she knows how to throw down.
You know what I think shows that best is when they do the screen tests and you see the people screen testing for Saraghina, and you're like, these women all suck. You're like, she's not the real Saraghina. They can't do the Roomba.
Yep. And then of course Guido gets found out, and he gets that Catholic guilt beat down, talking about how she's evil and horrible, and you shouldn't have anything to deal with her. And then you get this like amazing little like coda to that scene where young Guido goes back to the beach, and there's Saraghina just sitting on the chair with this like scarf kind of blowing in the wind. She turns back and kind of smiles. It's just like so good. I don't know. This is like one of those iconic moments for me. And people talk about like the harem scene as like the big moment of this movie, but for me it's this one. Yeah.
What harem? Oh, the Guido, cowboy Guido.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's next, isn't it?
Nope, not yet. Well, we're getting there though. Then we get sweating with the cardinal.
Ah, there it is.
Yeah.
I love dudes just smoking cigarettes in the sauna. I think that is hilarious.
Okay, so here's a tale. So I thought up until when I watched this movie, I thought smoking was so cool after watching this.
Yeah, it is.
This movie, like, man, everyone who's smoking in this fucking movie, it makes it look like, man, I'm really missing out not smoking. I really.
So did you pick up smoking because of this movie?
It was definitely planted in my mind, I think. Like, and there's always like this like bullshit line about like in Marvel comics, like no one smokes anymore because like Joe Quesada's dad died of like lung cancer, and he's like, fuck it, no smoking in comics. Wolverine can't smoke anymore. No one smokes, and it's like it doesn't even matter. Like it just like when does smoking ever become a plot point in a superhero book? But it's gone. Like it's not in there at all. But I remember watching this movie and being like, I always thought that was like really stupid. This idea that people would be that suggestible, like watching people smoking something, being like, yeah, I'm gonna start smoking. But this was the one movie where I was like, that seems like really cool. It seems like a good idea because all these cool, suave Italian people who dress really well are all smoking. So maybe I should too.
You should. Smoking's pretty good.
Yeah, it's fun.
Smoking's pretty awesome, man.
Yeah. So we get the sweating with the Cardi, and then we get this like car expo, car dealership auction building scene, which is how we get the arrival of Louisa, Guido's wife, Anouk Amy, who is this like, I don't know, this actress, she has something going on. Like she is like has such a great energy to her. Like I think like she's so good in this movie, and like because she has like this like task, like the movie just kind of shifts gears as soon as she finally arrives. It feels like, and that's like so. After she shows up, I was kind of curious. I'm like, oh, how much longer is in this movie? And I looked, and I'm like, holy shit, it's been an hour and a half. Like, this movie is just trucking along so easily, unlike another movie I'll talk about.
Okay.
And then, yeah, we get more nightlife. Now that Louise is there, Guido and him, they're hanging out, and everyone's palling around, and more conversations about, like, the pressure of the film coming on, and dudes macking on his wife, etc. Then we get the spaceship set scene, which is like this, yeah. So you sort of like, 'cause we've been hearing about this spaceship throughout this like production. You're kind of like, what is this movie? But then like there's this brilliant idea that like we actually get a spaceship scene in 8.5 because the movie that they're making never gets made. And like Fellini was like, yeah, we're never going to get there. But like at some point, this like fucking producer, he's got this idea. We got to make a sci-fi movie. We got to like just like Mario Bava's doing with that Planet of the Vampires. Like you just get these things where you're like, oh, we got to make something like this. And so Fellini's like, well, I've got a way of figuring it out, but it's got to land all these things. And so the brilliant idea that Fellini had was like, well, I'm not going to make this movie, but I'm going to make this movie instead, and it's going to have all these things that I was trying to figure out all along. It's so smart. And then we get, this sort of tension between these two, this couple, where things are fraying, you don't know why. And then we get like all the awkwardness of the next day breakfast awkwardness when your mistress shows up at the same cafe that you're eating at with your wife, and that scene's so good. And just like, because it's like the gaslighting, right? It's just like, what are you talking about? I didn't even know she was in town. And she's just like, no, don't insult my goddamn intelligence. And then they start talking about him like he's not there, which is really good. And then of course this is just like steaming old Guido off real bad. And then we get the transition of to the harem scene, because Carla and Louisa in the dream sequence become really close friends and are like all chatty and friendly, and then they go and all become submissives to Guido in his bathtub, and coming home at Christmas with gifts, and they turn and rebel on him, but he keeps them all in order with his bullwhip. We get Louisa, who gets the thankless role of being the Madonna in the complex of Madonna and whoredom. I don't know. The scene's like good and interesting, but people really talk about this more than anything else, kind of, which is, I don't know.
I liked that he was a cowboy.
Yeah, his that funky hat, his like pseudo Catholic priest hat that he's rocking. That's like, I don't know.
It's pretty cool. Yeah, I don't know. I think that scene's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. Like, it's not like, but for me, like, there's so many other things that I find remarkable more than that. It's like good. It's interesting. It's exciting. I like the build of his like his too slow of realization of what's going on when they all turn on him simultaneously. And then we get the running of the dailies, the test footage awkwardness of like, when you make movies about people in your own life and you have to make this sort of honest story about it, those people are going to see what you think about them. And it's one of the problems of making art, or trying to make like an authentic, truthful art, is because it's going to probably in some way hurt the ones that you love, and you have to deal with that. And so at what point do you like draw that line?
You know what this really reminded me of? It reminded me of Mother by Darren Aronofsky, and like creating, because you know how like there's the biblical interpretation of that movie, but then there's the other one where it's like creating something and then putting it out there and then it being like misinterpreted or like misconstrued. I was thinking about that a lot during this movie. We're not necessarily in the test screenings, because it's like you said, they were getting like what real impressions of them were, but I don't know. For some reason, when you're talking about that, I was like, yeah, this movie really reminded me of Mother for some reason.
Well, yeah, you were kind of talking like with the anxieties of that opening scene and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And the way the camera works and stuff like that. Like there's similarities. I guess you could definitely you could begin to suggest that. And then we got Guido going out with his muse. He breaks away from this bullshit, and he goes on a car ride. And he thinks, like, finally, this beautiful young woman, she's going to answer all my problems. And then she doesn't, because she doesn't know shit either, just like the rest of us. No one knows anything, because if they did, we wouldn't be where we are. Eventually, he just gets dragged back into the madness. They come and find him in the middle of the street, and they drag him back into to the press conference at the spaceship set, and it's like he's being drugged off to his own execution, like he's fighting it, and they're dragging him. Oh, come on. And then we all get that crazy intense flurry of scenery and people asking questions that, like, I don't know what you would call it, like people just in the foreground and shot in this way, and this like really accentuates their human faces, because usually people always want to like kind of look attractive, they want to look beautiful, they want to look their best, like they're always at that right angle. But Fellini's like, nah, that's boring. Everyone has like character to their face. If you have a big nose, a big chin, big forehead, weird ears, big freaky eyes, big cheeks, I want to accentuate that. That's what makes you beautiful and interesting. And that's like sort of like this ongoing thing with this thing. And it's like
it's cartoonist and
exactly the that caricature is part of him. And then we get Guido shooting himself in the head under a table. Which I've seen some people think of it as literal, which I think's like everything's.
I never thought that, but
no, me neither. I think it's like he's committed career suicide. I guess, because the home stretch is that the project's over, the set's got to come down. One thing we haven't talked about, the ongoing like the film critic in this. Which I always think of like Godard, I guess, like the French New Wave sort of thinking, which is like he'd be a contemporary of this, so it wouldn't be quite right, but maybe it's like that previous generation of film critic that like brought out the French New Wave stuff, and just this way of like talking about film and like if you want to make this really great film, this idea of like, yeah, you bring a film critic in because he'll help you like really narrow down your themes. But like, there's this sort of like constant like self-reflexive self-destruction that comes with film criticism that like makes it very much the antithesis of creating something, because you're always just like ruining yourself, like you overthink it, and it's like, and he literally says that destruction's better than creativity, and it's like the ultimate zinger
like
about his entire like that's what film critics are. It's like inevitably it's like the best film is no film, because then there's nothing that can go wrong, and that's kind of like his final dig, I think.
You know, I think there's something to that though. I don't know if you knew, but I used to write for the university paper.
You've mentioned that to me, yeah.
And I wrote movie reviews, and I think like 10 in or something, I watched a movie that like I really didn't like, and then I just wrote like a scathing review of it, and all the people at the paper were like, this is your best piece yet. And I was like, really? I was like, all I do is shit on a movie for like 1,000 words, like it's not that special, but apparently it was. And so I guess this guy is right. Destroying is better than creating, because like normally I just went to movies I wanted to watch. So my reviews were usually like, yeah, I like this. I knew I would. That's why I went to it. And then that one I was like, oh, this sucks. So I don't know. There's something to that though. People do like seeing reviews like just shitting on stuff.
They absolutely do. But you know what's interesting is like, I think like we've had a few people who've said that their favorite episodes are actually the ones where we're really positive on movies, because we have a lot more to say about things.
That's true.
Which is, so it's like, yeah, like something like Beauty and the Beast, come to mind, or like Passion of Joan of Arc. Perhaps even 8.5. I don't know.
Sure.
And then, so yeah, we get this home stretch, and we get the scene where he's sitting in the car and he's staring off into the distance, listening to the critic just ramble on about things and like waxing poetic. And then we get the big send. The hypnotist comes in. He's like, everything's ready. Let's go. And we get this like the celebration, which like is like the kind of like, one could argue is probably like the greatest thing that Fellini's ever directed or shot, is probably that final scene, because it's like everything he does. It's very like Wes Anderson-ish, and it's even like, it's like where everyone comes together and there's like kind of a big send-off, and that becomes really, really like apparent in Woody Allen's film Stardust Memories, which is a movie I just watched and is his 8.5, like full on 8.5. But I don't know, before we get into that, that celebration, how about it?
Yeah, it's good. I don't know. Yeah, it's awesome, man. It's like a culmination of everything that the movie is. Like the movie is a story about a story for a man. And then like this thing is, it's kind of like this nice little piece where he's just like, yeah, I'm the sum of like all my experiences and all these people in my life. They're the reason I am why I am. And it's like, and then this is like my ode to them, where it's like, I'm going to bring everyone back because it's only because of you that we're here together.
Yeah,
that kind of thing.
Yeah,
I was like, yeah, I like that.
Yeah, no matter all those experiences you have, good or bad, are kind of like the foundation of what one does and like draws from to make anything, to make art, make film. It's all based on that kind of thing. And it's like this whole march of like life, and like everyone's joyful, and it's like, yeah, you strip out, like, because you can do whatever you want in a film. That's like kind of like the big payoff to this movie. It's like, well, we never got to make the movie, and then this movie's like, oh, but we actually get to finish the movie, and we can do whatever the fuck we want, because reality doesn't matter, dream doesn't matter. It's all simultaneous and interchangeable in this world, and you can just do it. Like there's like the awesome, like the one scene that like I found like weirdly touching too, is like where he's like, he sees his mom and dad who are dead, and he's like, oh hey mom. She's like, oh fuck, I'm whatever. She's like, I'm gonna be with your dad, and he's like, oh okay, because it's like this really nice moment of like kind of letting go, and like kind of like, well, yeah, live your own life, dude. Quit dwelling in the past and go see your mama. It's another great characteristic of the Italian man.
Oh, with the moms?
Yeah. The
spaghetti moms.
Yeah, spaghetti moms.
Yeah, well, this movie is all about burying the past, Jarrett.
And
it's about... Yeah.
Oh, I was going to say, like, it's the one thing that, I mean, we haven't even talked about up to this point, really, is Nino Rota and his, like, music and score for this movie. And it's just, like, all-time banger. It's amazing music. It gives me chills, the final sequence and the use of it.
Were they electrifying?
Yeah.
Ooh. You see what I did there, Jarrett?
Sure.
Do you see what I did there, Jarrett? Are you there?
So, RJ.
Yeah.
to accompany this occasion of talking about 8.5, I watched 2 films that draw heavily on 8.5. The first one, again, I've mentioned Woody Allen's Stardust Memories. This was his follow-up to Manhattan. So, I mean, he just comes off making Annie Hall, making Manhattan, and he decides, hey, I'm going to make Stardust Memories. Like a full-on, like, homage pastiche of 8.5. Like, specifically 8.5. And yeah, like it opens up with Woody Allen, like in the dream of him being trapped on a train, but he's like on the wrong train with a bunch of strangers, and he looks over and there's another train, and there's like all the people he knows all having a party, and he's like not been invited, and he wants to get off the train, but it starts off anyway. It's very similar, and like it's black and white. It works. Like it's just interesting watching it, being like, whoa, this is like so direct. Because I mean, in the context of like when this movie would have come out, like 1980, like the only way to watch 8.5 would have been on video, and like people would be talking about this, so it'd be kind of an interesting exercise. One thing I will say, I didn't love this movie. This is a one that hits people differently, though. Like there's like Roger Ebert was not a fan of this when it came out. A friend of mine, Dan, he loves 8.5, and he thinks Stardust Memories is like, he says it's one of his favorite Woody Allen movies. And I was like, really? Because like the first half of this I thought was like quite good. It's been a long time since I watched a Woody Allen, and let alone like a early days Woody Allen. And the one thing I think doesn't get talked about a lot with Woody Allen is how good of his facials he is. Like when he's like in close up, like he's so good like at his facial reactions. Like he actually is a really good performer. There's like the woodiness, the cadence of his characters kind of gets old. Yeah. Like his female characters, they all just are the same woman over and over and over again. And it's frustrating because even in this, there's like, oh, there's another scene with him talking with like his like female character about a movie, and they're talking about it the way that he thinks that like women talk about it, or like his like intellectual New York circle of people talk about it, and it's like always the same, and it's just like Seinfeld, where like everybody talks like a Seinfeld character.
Can I say something about Woody Allen?
Absolutely.
As we do this Criterion initiative, my opinion of Woody Allen is getting like weaker and weaker every movie we watch, because it's becoming so apparent that he like just ripped off so much stuff, which like I don't care about. Like, yeah, you should take good parts from good movies and make them your own, but it's like it seems like every other week it's like, oh yeah, Woody Allen did this in this movie. It's like, fuck, did he do anything original?
Well, okay, so there's this very specific window of time, like right after he made Manhattan, where he's making these like homage movies too.
Like Bergman.
Bergman. He makes like September, Another Woman. Like those are his full on like references. But like he was a film nerd. Like he's like kind of like one of the first film nerds doing this stuff. And which I mean, like whatever. Tarantino's doing the same thing, but he's picking like shit movies, like exploitation trash movies that like no one cares about. Whereas Woody Allen was the guy of his time looking at these like art house cinema movies that were like starting to pick up steam in the 60s and stuff like that. And he's like, oh, I'm going to make one of those too. And because he could, which I don't knock against him, because he's still like, they're still obviously like Woody Allen movies. Like he's still writing them that way. But yeah, like he's like the original film nerd. I just think it's interesting that like you'd go from like kind of peak, like the peak of his like creative abilities, which is like probably Annie Hall, Manhattan back to back. And then he decides, I'm going to make a Fellini movie now.
Yeah, I don't dislike him. All I'm saying is I'm seeing through you, Woody Allen.
Well, there's a scene here because Charlotte Rampling is kind of in this movie, like in the flashbacks. It's like kind of his wife character that you don't get to see because she's like always like she was like kind of a stress case. And there's this scene though where she's like accusing Woody Allen of hitting on her 14-year-old niece. Nice. Or cousin, and he's like, why would I ever do that? And I'm like, oh. And it's like, but it's like,
why?
But then again, I start thinking about gaslighting, and I'm like, oh.
Yeah, that's Woody.
That's Woody.
It's like I was saying when I watched Manhattan, and I was like, where all the dialogue was so clearly written by like a 40-year-old man who was like trying to convince people that it was okay for him to be like in a relationship with like a 15-year-old girl, where like the other women characters are like, oh, age isn't a big deal. If they like each other, it's okay. He's just like expressing himself. And it's like, I wonder who wrote that, Woody.
There is aliens in this movie, RJ.
I noticed, and I love it.
Yep.
That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, this is the movie where the classic line, I like your earlier, funnier movies. This is like the movie where all that is the ongoing joke throughout it. This movie's it's really interesting, I guess, to watch it back to back because you can see all the rhythms and stuff like that, and like some of the visual jokes are still kind of funny. But I wasn't totally wowed by it either. But you know what I was absolutely not wowed by in the slightest?
What's that, Jer?
Rob Marshall's 9 from 2009.
Is that the Beanbag movie?
No,
like
that's
the Beanbag people?
That's like the number 9, also from 2009, about Beanbag people. This is 9, based on the 1982 Tony Award-winning musical 9, which is the musical version of 8.5. Like, it is a full-on like remake of 8.5. But you know, I think the original play had like Jonathan Pryce from Brazil as Guido and Salmi. And yeah, it's just like a reinterpretation. And this is like a American musical movie of 8.5 with Daniel Day-Lewis. And let it be said that we all love Daniel Day-Lewis, but you know what?
Yeah.
He's not like a guy who's like, if he's in the movie, it's going to be amazing, because he's got a bunch of stuff that no one talks about at all, too, outside of like the obvious movies. And this is one of those movies where it's like, I don't think he was very well cast in this. He's not Italian. He's like he's doing his Italian. He's doing this Italian accent. Yeah, he's doing that, and it's like his singing is not amazing. His performance, his ability to be like when he needs to do that stuff is not quite there. Yeah, I don't know. Very odd choice, but yeah, this is just like as I watched earlier this year, Chicago. It's definitely Rob Marshall, and it's definitely a musical. As I mentioned to you off podcast, I think the appeal of these movies is like people like musicals, and they like to watch like beautiful people dancing. They like to watch dance and stuff like that. And it's like, yeah, professional dancers, particularly women, they are fit physical specimens. They look amazing because they're
what, Jarrett?
Fit physical specimens. They look great.
Okay.
Their bodies are totally tuned up. Their muscles are like peak shape to dance, and it's like a very pleasing figure, and it like looks really great when it's moving around. And you go, wow, look at all these beautiful hot women. But that's not a movie. That's just like, oh, yep. And you're also editing constantly. We talked about this back when we were watching Swing Time. How like Fred Astaire would shoot musical scenes from afar, and he had things situated in a way where you'd see the full dancer moving back and forth, and he hated close-ups, all these sort of like rules he had about how to make a musical. This movie, you know, it's a 2009 musical. Nah, fuck that shit. We're going to constantly cut into scenes, and like, so you never really focus on it. You always get to see like the actress that you know and recognize in the foreground, and then you get all the anonymous people in the back because they're just the filler that are there for the moment and for the movement. But yeah, I watched, what is it? I think I did a time check on like, how much longer is this? And I was like, oh God, I've only watched like 30 minutes of it. I'm only a quarter of the way through because it's 2 hours long. And it's just brutal, uninteresting, unnecessary. The flights of fancy that are like so well integrated into 8.5, they're just like obvious like flights of fancy stuff, just like in Chicago, where it's like, oh, we have to make a clear delineation of when reality and musical fantasy occur, otherwise audiences will be confused. And it's really like, oh God. And that's actually one of the things with Stardust Memories I was kind of like surprised by, was how poorly the flights of fantasies were incorporated into the movie in comparison to like how good Fellini does it.
What about that Beanbag movie though? Which one's better?
I haven't seen the Beanbag one.
Do you even care about this podcast?
Is that like Little Big Planet?
I think it is, but I think it's like the edgy version because it's like Gore Verbinski or something like that.
Oh man.
It's edgy, bro.
Are you familiar at all with that 9?
I know the Beanbag one.
Yeah.
No, I heard about this one time, and I think my first reaction was like, that's not a movie.
I think I brought it up to you, and you were like, what?
Yeah. It's like, yeah, it's like, I don't think that's a movie. I've never heard of such a thing.
Yeah.
And I still don't think it's a movie.
Yeah, we have Fergie shows up to as Seraphina, of course.
Like Fergie Ferg
Yeah, Fergie.
from Black Eyed Peas.
Correct.
Oh, she's Saraghina?
Yeah.
She's not thick enough to be Saraghina.
Maybe she bulked up for this one.
They should have got Danny DeVito. Threw a wig on him.
Wow.
Sex style.
Sex style. Well,
You ever seen one of those?
no. Well, yeah, those are some thoughts about there's so many like people doing their own 8.5s. This is just a couple of direct descendants of that though. But hey, RJ,
What?
there's some people who hate 8.5.
Yeah. Yeah.
Want to hear from them?
Not really, but you're going to do it anyway, so.
Half star is getting busted out.
Ooh, Jesus.
Lillian Crawford. I really hope that Fellini felt better for having made this.
Are they implying that this was like some kind of self-treatment for Fellini?
Maybe it was. Who cares?
Yeah, that's what film is, bro.
Yeah.
Bruh.
What can you tell us about Lillian Crawford?
Who, me? Wow, I am a little bit behind here.
Yeah.
You keep going.
Simon Evans, half a star. I am unsure how this movie's seen by many as a classic. Burnt out images and a forced semi-storyline of sorts left me cold. For me, it is like the student who finds something cool out of nothing just to say it's cool. Lots of close-ups of elderly, once glamorous women mixed in with younger, desperate females. So whenever someone says that, I just think of Ferengis trying to get that part in the director's new movie. Well, he seems to have no idea what the storyline is or will be. His mind plays games with us, and his dreams become integral to what is already a confusing story. And I was kept reminded that it all felt so shallow. This could well be director Fellini's comment on movie making at the time, or the state of Italian politics. Who knows?
Simon Evans, eh?
No.
This guy is a little out there. They just watch movies from the 30s and the 40s. They have no 5-star ratings.
Oh,
that's
shit.
Pretty wild.
They're all about tall orders.
But they do have some half-star ratings. Your new favorite movie, Hereditary, it was given a half-star. Kong, Skull Island, was given a half-star. Exodus, Gods and Kings, that movie's pretty bad. It's not half-star bad. No. This person's a little out there. But back to Lillian Crawford, Jarrett, because you messed that up. Favorite films include The Skin I Live In and In the Mood for Love.
Whoa.
Yeah, and they don't have very many 5-star movies either, but they do have The Artist and The Shape of Water as 5-star movies. They do have stuff like Amadeus and, Billy Elliot. That's pretty cool. But First Man, that's not a 5-star movie. Lillian Crawford. What you talking about, girl?
We have Andrew Swafford, who writes, found the other half.
Oh, that's so funny, Jarrett. That's so funny. Would you believe that they are a fan of Do the Right Thing?
It would surprise me.
They're also a fan, Jarrett, of Twin Peaks.
Oh.
And Suspiria.
Wow.
And The Matrix.
Whoa.
Oh, 5 stars to The Conjuring. Oh, here we go. 5 stars, Funny Games from 2007.
Nice.
That's right. The remake. Oof.
Real Asian Friend, half a star. Oof. There are too many works like this. For example, Memories of Underdevelopment. White, cis, heterosexual male artists consider that their thoughts works are so deep and great that they fall in love with themselves and make artworks that show white, cis, heterosexual male wonders the world with pretty young vaginas, which of course should be attracted with such middle-aged man. How can we have art without white male?
Okay. They have a lot of movies that they've given 5 stars. Lots of movies, Jarrett. Not a lot in between 5 stars and half a star. So it's either 5-star or it's a half a star.
I see.
But their favorite movies are Agnes Varda movies, like Cleo from 5 to 7. That movie that we were really, really stoked about.
Right.
Yeah.
I got one more here, RJ.
All right.
Simon Evans logged this movie twice.
Oh, really?
Half a star. And this is from like 3 years earlier. A masterpiece, they say. I have never seen a movie where I simply did not get any of it. Total shambles from start to finish. I would not know where to start and where to end. Not 1 minute of this 2-hour piece did I understand or care to understand. I am obviously not in on what is meant to be great. I felt like I had watched a movie where if you felt like throwing an idea into the arena, then so be it. Having read numerous reviews on IMDb that shout masterpiece loudly, I must admit to being dumbstruck. I am not a sheep and will shout loudly for myself and say not for me without taking a swipe. Shell shocked. Totally off its rocks. I liked the scaffolding sequence. I did not enjoy the experience.
Not a sheep, hey? I find it hard to believe that they gave Lost in Translation 4.5 stars when they're not being the sheep. Affliction 4.5 stars, I understand.
Huh.
That's a pretty cool movie. But The Revenant 4.5 stars? You mean that remake of Gladiator, The Revenant? Carol? Actually, so again, I didn't mention it before because I was like, well, whatever. Everyone who shits on 8.5 likes that movie Carol, that Todd Haynes movie. Like, I'm not kidding. This Simon Evans person likes Carol. What was it? Not Real Asian Friend. Andrew Swafford. They liked Carol, and Lillian Crawford. Crawford. That's weird. They all gave Carol like 5 stars.
Huh.
What is going on with people on Letterboxd? I don't get it.
Nah, I don't know.
Also, In the Mood for Love seems to be pretty popular with these people.
Well,
it's weird.
Just a few more weeks.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I don't know, man. 8.5. It's up there for me as far
Good?
as these criterions go. Way up
Would
there.
you say it's pretty good?
Yeah, I mean,
Is it in your top 5?
I'd say it's in the second, in the 101 to 200 range. So far, I'd say it's the top of the pile.
Oh, it's number 1 of list number 2.
Yes. My private list.
Your private list. Your
Yeah.
privates. Yeah.
There's not that much competition, though. It's
Not in the back end yet.
No, so far it's been like it's pretty easy to pick out the winners in the pack anyway. Anyways, yeah.
Well, there you have it.
After the break, I'm going to be dead because I'm crawling under this table here and shooting myself in the head.
It's about time.
You just have to tear down the podcast setup here, RJ. We're going home.
Well, destroying's better than creating, I guess.